we're discussing a sector that's very interesting, and it's inherently it's a sector that there's a lot of inquisitiveness about it. There's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of intrigue, and you know, historically we've seen 2001 Space Odyssey and all the fantastic space movies that we've produced over the years has fueled that more. And in 2020, India opened up its space sector for private sector participation. And since then, we've had a lot of buzz with all of you. I think we've spoken quite a few times. Suyash, I remember we spoke sometime, I think, late 21 or early 22 when on the initial days. And Chaitanya has been a long time friend and advisor. And Arjun, of course, Speciale, the name has been ever present as an early investor in the space sector. And today we stand at a point where there's considerable buzz around the space sector. We're looking at being a nation that's recognized at par with the United States, or at least comparatively with the United States. You know, SpaceX is not the only solution, something to that effect. And ISRO's success with Chandrayaan and so on have kind of also played a role. All of that leaves us at a point where the private space sector is one that a lot of people are bullish on. And Suyash, I'll probably start with you. As a private space startup, building solutions for space out of India, one of the biggest challenges I remember us also discussing a couple of years ago is that the access to capital to build solutions for space, because space is a very capex heavy space to do, just not just research, but overall development, creating a product, getting the confidence of clients to sort of actually use your product and rely on you and so on and so forth. So if you want to speak about your journey in terms of what GalaxEye does and your journey of raising capital and getting both investors' confidence and clients' confidence until now.
Sure, Shavik. First of all, thank you so much for inviting on a Saturday to Mumbai. No, but much appreciated you calling us. But yeah, you know, let me start with my introduction. So I'm Suyash, co-founder, CEO at GalaxEye. GalaxEye is a 2.5-year-old space tech startup. What we do is we are building a next generation Earth observation satellite. What does that mean? It means the satellite imagery that we get from satellites today is pretty intermittent. You know, we don't get it all the time. A simple thing to think about is when you're monitoring agriculture farm throughout the year, 4 months straight, you don't have any imagery because of rains and clouds. And the substitute to a camera like satellite imagery, which is radars, is not as understandable. So at GalaxEye, what we're trying to do is make sure that a very meaningful satellite imagery is always available for your perusal throughout the year, no matter if it is cloudy or nighttime, right? So I think this explanation maybe, you know, is a good segue to think about why funding to this space is challenging, because what we're doing is global first. It has not been done by a competitor or a player in the US or globally anywhere else. So, you know, it needs certain amount of maturity in the beginning of the stage, in the early stages, to really prove and test out, and then you actually go to space. So I think it's very subjective why access to capital is difficult, or why access to capital is not so intuitive in the beginning or even at the growth stage, is because unlike the deep tech ecosystem at large, space tech has its own gestation period. So the first thing that you see, or a first prototype that you see, will only come when you have an asset in space.
Right. Absolutely.
right? And it will take some amount of time to put that asset into space. So till that time, how do you actually invest in resources? How do you invest in building prototypes and doing things, right? So I think this is the reason why it is actually slightly more difficult even with the other deep tech startups, right? For example, I know which Arjun has also funded another company called a hydrogen, they extract hydrogen from different sources. So with that also you can build smaller prototypes and still can go to the market, do demos to your customers, you can build POCs, you can open up your doors towards your B2B customers, B2G customers as well. But with space, it is not as easy as that. So I think we were able to do that. And Arjun is here, so I'll be very consistent with my story. So he's one of my investors.
Yes.
So I think the way we were able to do that is we still innovated on our technology development strategy. So we said instead of going to space and seeing the first prototype when the space asset is in the orbit, we started developing something lower on altitude. We developed prototypes that can fly on aircrafts,
right,
drones. We proved the technology and then raised certain amount of capital
yes,
for the next time. And that is how we are taking it one step at a time to space.
Right, absolutely. Arjun, in fact, this is probably the perfect opportunity to pass the mic on to you in terms of you're investing in space, which is a sort of nascent sector in India. So how do you hedge your bets when you look at space sector as a potentially big investment opportunity?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think Suyash has set the stage fairly well. One thing that is important is upfront, why are we picking the sector among multiple areas of deep technology, right? There is this obvious, but still that hasn't translated into capital, but history and heritage of ISRO in India, right? And that is not new. We've been building rockets and satellites and space tech for many, many decades now, right? Now, of course, we want to go private and enable companies like GalaxEye and others to build privately and make them commercially viable. But, that heritage gives us a lot of confidence that we can do it in this country, right? Because of the know-how available, right? From a hedging perspective, honestly, we are just looking at the size of the opportunity and the gaps in the market that are available in whatever solution a specific space tech company is building for. In this case, like Suyash mentioned, they're building a certain type of Earth observation satellites which are so far not available, correct? And they'll give imagery that is really almost impossible or rare to find today, right? So from our perspective, if we see a large market and a really large opportunity, yes, it might take a few years, but as early stage investors, that is the risk that we are baking in, right? To say, yes, it anyway takes a decade to build a company, right? The difference here is that you don't see revenue for the first 4 or 5 years,
right,
possibly. And that is a realization, and therefore you have to set up your capital allocation and the risk reward ratio accordingly.
right.
It doesn't mean that the business is not viable, right? It only means that revenue starts slightly later, right? And you have to prove in that time frames the interim steps that Suyash is talking about. But the exciting thing about these companies is because they are so differentiated, what happens at that end, at that 4 or 5 year time horizon, once the product is ready and once it is launched in space, then the revenue uptick is really sharp.
Right.
Or at least that's the way we think about how they're modeling the business.
Right.
And that is very exciting. So it's not a steady curve, right? It's flat for a period of time, but then there's a steep uptake, right? Because you're ready and you're in space and customers really want it.
Right.
Data that is not otherwise available.
Right.
Sort of the way to think about
Right.
it.
In fact, one of the companies that you invested in, I think Agnikul is supposed to host its launch.
Yeah, we're all very excited.
First
It's
launch.
a key moment, of course, for us as investors, for the company more importantly, and we believe for the ecosystem, right? It's taken 5+ years, possibly 6 years since the company started, 5 years since we invested. This will be, a first of many kinds, right? A private launch vehicle. We are hoping it will happen in the coming days. We're all
Right.
waiting for the final date.
Right.
Right? So, that's exactly. And then once we see that the first 1 or 2 test launches happen, I think we have the pipeline for revenue is very, very attractive. That's
Right.
what keeps us going in these complex domains.
Right, absolutely. And Chaitanya, I'll come to you with that. What Arjun mentioned, it's been a 5-year runway of having invested in Agnikul, and now we're looking at the first test launch. So, of course, maybe a couple of years until they hit like regular commercial revenue. For Suyash, of course, maybe a couple of years out until a constant stream of ARR coming in. But in the many conversations I remember you and I have had, we've never had a phone call below 30 minutes, I think. And a part of the reasons is to kind of understand the challenges in this sector. One of them being availability of skilled resources, which we were just now speaking about. And also access to capital in terms of, when we look at the US, the success of SpaceX was based off billion-dollar investments by Google and so on. So where do we stand right now in terms of, the entire hype around space as a sector versus us practically being able to get there?
So firstly, I'd like to congratulate Mint for organizing this particular session here in Mumbai. I've always been bullish about Mumbai, the investments that this city can make in the space sector. It has made some legacy investments. We have JD Patil sir here, representing the Mumbai space community. But having said that, I'll give you a brief. This city has been instrumental in the creation of the Indian space program. Go back to the 1960s, the Atomic Energy Commission, when it developed a body known as Indian National Committee on Space Research. It was set up here in Mumbai. Over the course of the next few decades or so, establishments out of Mumbai have been contributing to the Indian instrumentation that has been coming out of ISRO. So it is not that this city has been far away from the space program. So let us not be in that assumption. We have entered into a new era of the space sector, which is known as Space 2.0. So in the Space 1.0, we had big corporations, conglomerates, engineering companies providing tech to ISRO. In Space 2.2, especially after the reforms that were kickstarted in 2020, the new mantra is that innovation will come from the private sector. The private sector will not build as per the designs of ISRO, which was the case in the earlier era. In the new era, you are the OEM manufacturers. So that's the new change. Now, we spoke about the market, the
Yes.
capital, the access to capital. Yes, there is quite a lot of capital lying around. I've been hearing a lot of wonderful sessions since the morning. But there is some hesitation of investing in a sector that has such a long gestation period.
Absolutely.
But the idea here is, number one, you have to see the space program hereafter with 3 different Venn diagrams, the Venn diagrams that we studied in high school. One Venn diagram is that of the civilian space sector, the other one is of the military space sector, and the third one is of the commercial space sector. All these Venn diagrams, or all these 3 circles, are intertwined, just like the symbol of that car manufacturer, Audi.
Right.
So they are going around each other. They will interface with each other. They will work with each other, and that will lead to creation of newer contracts. So in the coming years is what I believe. There will be numerous contracts coming in from the Defense Space Agency, which was established just 4 years ago. There will continue to be sort of contracts coming in via ISRO. And there will be, of course, a lot of B2B engagements between the commercial space companies that we have talked about. So tomorrow, there will be an Indian launch vehicle, private sector launch vehicle, launching a privately built satellite from our Indian soil. So we are looking at that kind of a business proposition. So the future is bright. What we need to focus on is how to channelize investments and how to channelize this capital into the space sector, and we'll be good there.
Right. I'd probably now open it up to all of you to answer this. How's the confidence like in the Indian space sector? Because generally, space contract confidence is really high in the United States because of their historic success with Northrop Grumman and now SpaceX and Lockheed Martin and so on. In India, of course, ISRO's got that heritage. But Suyash, for instance, yourself, this is the first time you're building something right from scratch. So in your conversations with a varied range of investors or clients and so on, do you see that confidence reflecting in India as well?
Yeah, I think 200%, like, and that is because you are talking to the doors in ISRO is open more than ever. I can have an advisor who has launched a bunch of satellites earlier. I can go and talk to them. I can go and speak to them. I can actually tap into the facilities of ISRO. Of course, it takes its fair level of due diligence to go and use them, but it is possible to go and use the facilities there. It is possible to go and have chat. So I think investors have also understood that the doors of ISRO are open, and that is where the confidence is that someone like me can go and build, even if I'm fresh out of college, which I was not, but I think there is a fair amount of possibility that you can go and do. And specifically in the new space era, which is Space 2.0, we are not only talking about radiation hardened components, we are actually experimenting with commercial components, and we are doing much more beyond it, right? So whatever I do in my lab, in my college, I think it's still applicable to a certain extent here. And doors in ISRO opening up is giving another level of confidence.
Right, absolutely. Arjun?
I think the couple of data points that I'll share, which shows the bullishness across the ecosystem. We invested in Agnikul 5 years ago. Maybe there were less than 10 space startups in the country at that point in time. A couple of launch vehicle companies. I think it's close to 200 now, if it hasn't crossed already, right? 200 startups and growing at a very, very fast clip.
Right.
That just shows that people are taking inspiration from the first wave of entrepreneurs in space, which is the Agnikul, the GalaxEye of the world, and like they say, the first one through the door always gets bloodied, right? Because there's lack of capital, there's lack of know-how. You've got to figure it out. You've got to work with ISRO. ISRO also doing that for the first time. There's a lot of challenges that these guys have faced. That is, for the first time. But the second wave will benefit from that.
Right.
Right. And hopefully these guys go from strength to strength. Correct. So that is super bullish. And then again, when we talk to our other peers and colleagues in the investment community, everybody's looking at this sector.
Right.
Nobody's thinking of this as to be exotic or something future. Of course, capital is still not hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Right. But we'll get there. Right. Usually capital follows when one or two, breakthrough moments happen. Usually investors like to wait for, let's say, one large success story, let's say one unicorn, for lack of a better term, right? But as soon as that happens, which we are very close to, I think, in our ecosystem, right, floodgates are going to open. Capital is available, like already has been mentioned, and everybody's spending time on this ecosystem. So these are two data points that is just, very clear where we're going.
Right, right. Chaitanya, in fact, one more thing that I remember on this line, what we were discussing is, would the government need to play a bigger role as a customer? Because again, globally, that's what we've seen to be a heavy contributor to global space sector success. Are we getting there? Are we approaching that end?
Yeah, we are getting there. With IDEX, which is Innovation for Defense Excellence, that's a program run by Ministry of Defense. They had called on for 75 defense space challenges. So 75 use cases which are required by the defense sector, and there were invitees from all across MSMEs, SMEs, startups, and there's a good response to that particular program. Likewise, ISRO in the coming months will be coming up with 100 space challenges. Again, use cases provided by the civilian space sector. And again, you'll have these and many other newer space startups, sort of making a beeline there. The third use case that is coming up is from state governments. And state governments are more so interested in downstream applications where imagery can be used for administrative purposes, governance purposes, be it urban management, be it roads, irrigation, agriculture, so on and so forth. So I'm quite bullish that in the coming years, as we keep talking about the space sector more and more on such platforms, there'll be many creative use cases, and those will lead to really strong business.
Right. We'll also have to talk about FDI since we're at an investment summit and talking about space. How helpful is the FDI policy? Arjun, maybe we'll start with you.
No, I think immensely helpful. It's a sector that needs capital, like we've already spoken. It needs larger pools of capital given the capex needed and the scale of operations, particularly if you want to achieve the targets that we are looking to achieve as an ecosystem, right? I think there's some numbers out there, I think getting close to 50 billion as a commercial market for India itself, right, somewhere in the next 7 to 10 years, and that's a fair, large goal. And for that, we need all the support that's possible. So I think that's a signal from the government to say how serious they are about this industry. And it is not something that they have taken lightly, right, and opening it up. Of course, it means that it has to be balanced with which are the areas within space, because some of those could be subsectors of national interest and sensitive stuff, which should be protected from global ownership. But beyond that, a lot of the commercial use cases that needs large pools of capital, whether it is a launch vehicle, whether it is the different types of satellites, and then obviously the downstream, all right? And as we do the first successful launches, either of the vehicles or of the satellites, and the world sees that we have strong private space pedigree, right? The customers are going to line up, and FDI being open is a very, very positive sign. So I think that's a great signal that has come up very recently. It will also encourage local capital to be early movers,
right?
Because that there is larger pools coming from foreign,
right?
Which in general are, as our overall economy is developing, that's a good place to be, right?
More competitive.
We can mix it from local capital as well as global capital.
Right, absolutely. We would have probably liked to continue this for longer, but for the paucity of time, we'll quickly come to what I wanted to end with, which is to understand the challenges right now that are persistent in the sector. Suyash, I'll probably start with you. You're running a startup right now, which is trying to create a technology that is really novel. So what are the key challenges that you face, if you could quickly sum up in a minute?
I think the challenges are pretty much in all the entire gamut, I would say, right? Starts with talent, right? Like the quality of talent that you want to hire. It's always a hustle and a tussle between a Gen AI career option or a hardware company career option for freshers, right? And beyond that, I think we were discussing backstage as well, it's not as easy to find talent in the traditional companies because the hunger to innovate is little lesser than what it is in the freshers. Beyond that, I think the test facilities have to double down slowly and gradually because it's hardware. Testing cycles have to become more faster because we cannot wait for more and more longer. But all in all said, I guess it's moving in the positive direction. Like, the authorities are helping, government is helping. Pretty positive about it, but, still we have to solve for some of those challenges. Funding, of course, on a growth stage is still a challenge. FDI coming in is certainly a signal to the larger pool being available in the future, but I still see, how do you break that puzzle between generating revenue and hitting the milestones and then going to the further stage of your company.
Right, absolutely. Chaitanya, your take on some of the key challenges, or maybe just one probably because of...
So one challenge that I would like to present to the Mumbai audience here is, number one, we need more domestic institutional investors in the space sector. Don't start immediately, but get to hear, get to know about the nitty-gritties of this sector. We are ready to discuss things with you all. And together, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, get to know each other more, so that on a horizon of, let's say, another 5 years or so, once we have the first crop of space tech companies demonstrating their tech, and once the sector itself is confident about its own deliveries, you guys will be even more confident, and that will also lead to more money coming in from within. So apart from FDI, we need more domestic capital to start, pumping into the space sector so that it flourishes without any geopolitical or geoeconomic hassles.
Right, absolutely. Arjun, we're all staring at you since at the mention of domestic capital, and we have you wrap up with your final thoughts on what are the challenges.
Super excited. We're bullish. We continue to be, committed to this ecosystem, and we've made 5 investments so far. Our most recent is actually a Bombay startup, right from IIT Bombay, and so we're very excited, and I think more and more use cases will emerge. Of course, we are among the smaller players in the ecosystem, being early stage investors, but we encourage all early, late stage, and we keep interacting with everybody, right, so that we can pass on the infection of what is, what is exciting about this sector, right? It's a massive market. Next 10 years, let's all be patient and let's double down. That's all.
Great, wonderful. For all of you audience in the audience, if you have questions, we'd have to take it offline since we've run out of time. But thank you so much, and thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you.